Alright, so we're going to be looking at some of the behind-the-scenes stuff in the CaptainSparklez Mianite origin story video I posted a little while ago. Starting with the rig I used, this one was really thrown together because the rig I had before this one was complete garbage. It was like the first rig I ever made, and I knew I needed something a little bit better for this video. So I put this one together really quick. It doesn't have anything really special. It's just like all the standard stuff you'd expect. Eye control, eyebrow control, mouth control, and then IK and FK limbs, and then of course torso. But yeah, it's a really basic, just base rig, and then for each specific character, I'd add different controls as necessary. Alright, so next we're going to be looking at the Jerry's Tree, the fight at Jerry's Tree. This was the first scene I started working on. I didn't really know what I wanted to happen before as far as the story. I just knew I wanted there to be an epic fight. I knew I wanted it to be raining at night for dramatic effect. And I knew I wanted ultra survival stuff in there. So the tree, I just googled world map or Jerry's Tree Minecraft world, something like that. This was one of the first results, maybe the second or third. I got a Minecraft world with a application called Mineways. I can just select an area of a Minecraft world, export it as an OBJ, and that I can open in Maya, which saved me like an infinite amount of time. There's no way I could have made this by hand. It would have taken forever, at least for one person. And then similarly with the power suit, I was just able to download the mod, grab the OBJs which were inside the mod, and OBJs I can open in Maya. So that saved me all the time on texturing and modeling these. And then the sword I had to make, but that didn't take too long at all. As far as the animation goes, the length of it is 6,000 frames, and that was the first mistake I made. There's a lot of problems with this scene, a lot of things I would have done differently, and the root of that is kind of how long it is. So normally 6,000 frame scene wouldn't be too big of a deal, but there's a lot of dynamics in the scene, and with all those kind of compiled together, it makes it super hard to work with. Scrubbing in the timeline, at least with all these enabled, is not really possible, and jumping ahead and stuff will cause it to kind of crash, at least with everything enabled. So if I go ahead and hit play here, you're gonna see that you can look at this number here, or you can look at how quickly the frames change, but you can see I'm getting a super slow frame rate. And that's kind of due to all the dynamic stuff that's going on. So as far as particles go, I got fluids going on, particles going on, end particles, and all those together just combine to make a really slow playback. So if we go into here, gosh, particle count 17,000 at any given time for the rain, which isn't too bad by itself, but like I said, when you add everything else together, it really adds up. So yeah, 17 for the rain. This also includes, I guess, this jetpack here too. These are standard particles. I'm gonna go ahead and disable this stuff so I can scrub through a little bit better. Particles, end particles, fluids. If we hop over to the tree, all the torches all the torches are all fluid torches, and fluids again contribute to a really slow playback. They don't render too well in real time. You can kind of see the overall shape and color. But you can see there's a fluid box around each one of these, and so all the torches in the shots, all of them are fluid simulated torches. And then we have, I'm not going to show this part because this would play back really slowly, but the only time I use end particles are when the minion guy is getting his legs chopped off. I will say that's not Cronus or Cronus' brother or related to Cronus in any way. I just saw a few people commenting about that. It's not true. Anyway, yeah, end particles are used for when he's getting his legs chopped off. They're using what's called a bulby surface, and basically when two or more particles come near each other, they kind of form into one shape, or meld together, kind of simulating what liquid does. You can do that with standard particles, but end particles, the difference between particles and end particles are a little bit newer. The N stands for nucleus. This won't make any sense really though, unless you're familiar with Maya stuff. They're a little bit newer, a little bit better, but they are a little bit more costly on your machine as far as processing power and stuff like that. But they do a little bit better job with the bulby surfaces than the standard particles. And let's see, fluids. I also use fluids for the pond here, so this is a pretty dense mesh. Let me find it. Hold on here. Where is it? I could have just selected it in the viewport. It's somewhere. I'll just do that. I don't know why I was trying to select it in the outlook. Anyway, this is the fluids here, so you can see when it's a pretty dense mesh. Here's the little wake emitter. This simulates sparkles plopping into the water, and then little waves come out. And this too is heavy. Once this gets moving, it'll play back even slower than 1 frame a second. So with this moving, it'll probably play at like 0.2 frames per second or something, a frame every 5 seconds or so. With the blood, with the minion's blood, I'll go ahead and jump to the part, but where does that happen? Right around towards the end, where he's getting his legs chopped off. That would play back even slower because the mesh, it's just, yeah, it's a mess. So yeah, seeing this long with this many types of dynamics was really a pain to work with after a while, but it kind of turned out pretty well. The next problem was rendering this scene. Initially, this was really discouraging. I'd finished everything was done, and looking back, or after, thinking I was done and stuff, and then I was realizing when I was doing test renders and stuff, it was taking like 10 minutes on a given frame, even more depending on how much of like the fluids were shown, what particles were shown. It was taking somewhere around 10 minutes, and that was really discouraging. I was thinking maybe I'll disable depth of field, but that really added to it. Motion blur I took off so I could add later, but it still was taking way too long. It would have been like a month of just non-stop rendering if at the current rate it was going. So I knew this I could really cut down if I switched out the lights. You'll see this is just one big huge light. The lighting was just wasn't really well done. It looked a little bit better than the final result, but the renders were too long. So if you look at the scene name, Fight Finish Reworked. So I went through and I reworked a lot of stuff, shading wise, lighting wise, and I was able to cut it down to like 2.5 to 3 minutes per frame. But still, at 2.5 to 3 minutes, that's with 6,000 frames. It still was a bunch of days of just non-stop rendering. But yeah, that's the fight scene. This is the main. This is really where all the time was put into. Yeah. All right. Next we have the Ironite scene where the camera zooms in. You see Ironite, and stuff. Blah blah blah. Few things going on. We got the blocks here, and these are all animated. If you can't tell in the video, these are all move around slowly. And the quick way I did this is I have one block, right, and I just duplicated it, a few hundred times. I think there are like 600 or 700 of these in total. And I ran a little script. Let's see if it's still there. Yeah, this is the one. So this little script, basically, this is kind of a variation of it. But basically, I just ran a script that would move them in a random space in a 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000 block area. I did the same thing with rotation, so they all got randomly rotated. Then I jumped ahead like I think 400 frames or something like that. 371, whatever. And then I just ran the application again, then keyframed it again, so they all had just random rotation and movement. Another way you could have done this with particles, but this probably was a little bit faster than if I were to set up a particles system. So yeah, you might think this took a long time, but no, it only took a few moments, which is great. And then as far as this is just a thing made up of blocks. We zoom in. Sorry if this messes it up for you a little, but Mianite is a balding problem. I didn't bother for the hair. That's end cloth, so it flows around and stuff. I didn't bother to show any besides the stuff in the front. So if we tumble around here, oh no, Lady Ironite, what's wrong with your head? Yeah, so there was no reason to put it there, so it's not there. So yeah. And then let's see, the only thing really left. If I can get around to it. Oh, that looks so. I'm just gonna cut that out of the frame. There we go. Then we have the Eye of Ender, which comes up somewhere around There. Here it is. And this just plays an image sequence of them doing a little sword fight thing. Yeah, and that's pretty much all there is to it for the Ironite scene. Next we have Mianite in the clouds. This is just a big plane with emitting particles, cloudy particles. He's standing in the center. I currently have them disabled for playback's sake, so you'll see they're not really moving. If you look up here and I scrub to the timeline, they're not really moving. They're disabled. So yeah, he gets up, looks at the camera, blah blah blah, talk. Then he comes up. If I were to enable particles, you'd see the wall of clouds that kind of covers him coming up. But they're disabled, so yeah, he comes up. They do their little talk, and he goes back down. And that's pretty much it to this scene. Like you can see, as far as geometry and stuff like that, it's literally one face makes up the entire scene, except for the rigs. But yeah, that's pretty much it to this one. All right, next up we have the turning point, or when Minion decides to betray Mianite. When Dynite talks to him, comes down in a blast of particles, walks out all epic like. Portal comes up. Actually, if you look real close. Well, you don't even have to look that close. You can see there's blue here. This is actually the sky dome. Oh, and someone asked how I do sky domes. I'll get to that in a second. But you can see there's a little slit of blue here and here, and that's the sky dome from just going through the floor. I was too lazy to bother to cover that up. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, he pops out, chokes him, and then that's pretty much all there is. So then simple scene. Alright, so now we're going to look at how to make a sky dome real quick. I'll start with just a sphere. I'd make a super huge sphere, big enough to contain my whole scene, all the geometry in the scene, and be much bigger than the scene so it doesn't get in the way if I have to scroll out. Next, you're going to want to flip the normals so that they're facing inward. Okay. We're going to go to Attribute Editor, Render Stats, and uncheck double-sided. And this is why we flip the normals. So now we can see into it if we're looking from the outside, so if I roll around here, we can always see into it, but if we're in the inside and we look out, we can't see any of it. This is used in video games a lot. This is kind of like, especially you can see this a lot in Gary's mod. If you're like playing Prop Hunt or whatnot, you can look under the map kind of, and you can see this happening where you can see through if you're looking through the right side, if that makes any sense. And they do this, it saves rendering time. For animation purposes, it really isn't going to make that much of a difference. But for video games, when you need to get like 60 frames a second or whatever, if you're able to shave off that like 1/100th or 1,000th of a second, that really will contribute. So if you're trying to cut down on render times for your scenes, disabling double-sided from everything really is going to make a difference. But for our purposes, this makes it a little bit more convenient. For shading, I'm going to go to Assign New Material, Surface Shader. Surface shaders just aren't affected by lights. If you're in a different program, it might be called something else, but you just want a material that isn't affected by lights at all. So I'm going to assign the out color. I'm going to give it a ramp shader, and this is where personal preference kind of comes in for how you want the sky to look. But I'm just going to kind of move these around. I'll probably usually have like 3 or 4 of these going, but you'll just give them some sky blue colors. So we'll give that almost close, a little bit closer to white actually. Oop, no. Something like that. Give this one a deep blue kind of color. Something like this. Not that saturated, but something along these lines, and you'll end up with something like that. You might switch interpolation. There we go. Couldn't see that for a second. You might switch that to smooth. So that's pretty much it for the dome part. Next, we're going to add a little bit of fog, because a touch of fog is nice. So in volume primitives, sphere, it's going to start out real small. I'm going to switch this number up here to the same as the dome, or you can make it smaller, whatever. You'll get slightly different effects, but usually I'll make it this exact same size as the sky dome here. As far as shading this, I usually just leave it white, and the only thing you're going to mess with is the transparency and density, and this will just affect how thick the fog is. and you can mess around with these to get different effects, but usually I'll just leave it white and crank down the transparency to really, really low, just so it's just barely there. And then you don't, if you're gonna have an animated camera, you don't want the camera to move relative to the sky dome. So if I just make a camera real quick here, camera, and you don't want so you want it to move, you want the sky dome to move with the camera but not rotate, so we're going to use a point constraint for that. So with the camera selected, select the sphere, animation, constrain point, grab the camera. A little bit easier to do this in the outline, or I'll grab the fog and hit G, which repeats the last command, which was a point constraint. So now if I select the camera and move it around, everything moves with, but if I rotate the camera, everything stays still. And that's pretty much all there is to how I make sky domes I use in my scene. Alright, so the last scene here, where he finds them at the beach. The water's pink because I've moved stuff around, so there's probably some broken texture connections or something, which is why that's pink like that. The only thing I guess I did different is I wanted to try out a different kind of way of pulling focus, and I would usually just do it manually. Let me exit out of this. Actually, I shouldn't have done that. I usually would just adjust the focus distance manually, but in this case, I created this. You create this little measuring tool here. If I can select it, which I'm having trouble doing. Okay, there we go. This little measuring tool, and then two locators, one at the camera and one at where you want it to be focused, and basically set the focal distance of the camera equal to whatever this number is. So it's really easy. Wherever this locator here is, that's where the focus will be. And if I grab this and I just move it back and forth, you'll see it might be kind of hard to tell, but you can see the focus is changing, which was actually pretty convenient. I didn't think, I mean, I never had a problem pulling focus manually. It's not that too big of a deal, but this was pretty nice. It saved a little bit of time. But yeah, that's all there is really to the scene. The terrain here is the same terrain as where the Minion and Ironite meet up. I think it's, where is it at? Maybe it's right here? I don't remember actually where I took it from. But yeah, that terrain, this is the same terrain. Alright, so that's pretty much it for everything. I hope this gave you a little bit of insight. If you have any questions about anything you saw, leave a comment. I'll probably answer it. And thanks for watching.